All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today we'll be continuing with the text Vistas and moving on to the 8th chapter titled Memories of Childhood. All right, and in this chapter, there are two different parts, two different stories about two different girls facing two different situations. However, the similarity being that the difficulties that they were facing was of discrimination. All right. In this chapter, Memories of Childhood, we learn about two accounts, all right, two different episodes that took place in two different cultures at different places and in different times. But then, what is common about these two stories? Why these were put together for you to read as a single whole chapter titled Memories of Childhood is because it deals with a common universal theme of prejudices and humiliation faced by a marginalized communities from mainstream culture, and how both brave girls use their talent and education to stand up for their own and community rights. Both use the power of pen to fight oppression. All right. So they have written about, or rather, they have written their own biography, and these are just small excerpts out of their biographies highlighting some of the issues that they face in terms of discrimination. All right. Now, the first part, Cutting Off My Long Hair, is written by Gertrude Simmons Bonin, who was of Indian origin, all right, not Indian as in we, but Red Indians who were the original inhabitants of the continent of America, all right. Red Indian woman named Gertrude Simmons Bonin, and her pen name was Zitkala Sa. She wrote under the name Zitkala Shah. Sa. And the story which you're about to read is about a point in time wherein she used to attend a certain school called Carlisle Indian School. Indian school as in not our kind of a school, but schools that were in the continent of America. Why such schools were there? What was the purpose of the school? Was that so that the native Red Indian children could study there and learn about the habits and mannerism of the white people, all right, of the Americans, of the people who had colonized their country, America. And now she was learning to be American herself. And during her stay at that school, certain things had happened which did not agree with her soul, all right, which made her feel that she was being forced to accept things which she isn't even a part of. So that is what we will read in this story. So, following the text, the first day in the land of apples was a bitter and cold one, for the snow still covered the ground and the trees were bare. A large bell rang for breakfast, its loud metallic voice crashing through the belfry overhead and into our sensitive ears. The gnawing clatter of shoes on bare floors gave us no peace. The constant clash of harsh noises, with an undercurrent of many voices, murmuring an unknown tongue, made a bedlam within which I was securely tied. And though my spirit tore itself in struggling for its lost freedom, all was useless. So, the very beginning of her stay in the school was a very bad one, all right. She did not feel welcomed at that place, all right. All the atmosphere that was created in the school was very different for her and was very difficult for her to adapt. Even the sound made by the shoes on the floor was like a disturbance to her, right? She could not adjust to it at all. A pale-faced woman with white hair. Now, a pale-faced woman in this, she refers to an American woman, all right, because she is an Indian, a red Indian woman, red Indian girl, sorry, and she identifies Americans as pale-faced because of the white color of their face. Came up after us. We were placed in a line of girls who were marching into the dining room. These were Indian girls in stiff shoes and closely clinging dresses. The small girls wore sleeved aprons and shingled hair. As I walked noiselessly in my soft moccasins, I felt like sinking to the floor, for my blanket had been stripped from my shoulders. I looked hard at the Indian girls who seemed not to care that they were even more immodestly dressed than I in their tightly fitting clothes. While we marched in, the boys entered at an opposite door. I watched for the three young braves who came in our party. I spied them in the rear ranks, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. A small bell was tapped, and each of the pupils drew a chair from under the table. Supposingly, this act meant they were to be seated. I pulled out mine and at once slipped into it from one side. But when I turned my head, I saw that I was the only one seated, and all the rest at our table remained standing. Just as I began to rise, looking shyly around to see how chairs were to be used, a second bell was sounded. All were seated at last, and I had to crawl back into my chair again. I heard a man's voice at one end of the hall, and I looked around to see him. But all the others hung their heads over the plates. I caught the eyes of the pale-faced woman upon me. Immediately I dropped my eyes, wondering why I was so keenly watched by the strange woman. The man ceased his mutterings, and then a third bell was tapped. Everyone picked up his knife and fork and began eating. I began crying instead, for by this time I was afraid to venture anything more. So she was having a hard time as it was, all right? And she couldn't identify with the surroundings that she was in. There were girls, all right, other Indian girls as well, because it was a school meant for the Indians, the Red Indians. But even the other girls, she found them unfamiliar because of the way they were dressed, all right? They were wearing tight-fitting skirts. And she thought that it was immodest for girls of Indian origin to dress that way. And even their hair was shingled, all right? Everyone had their hair cut off to look very neat. And everyone was wearing shoes that made sounds. And only she was wearing soft moccasins, all right? Moccasins are shoes which are made out of soft soles, so it doesn't make a tapping sound whenever you are walking. And so she remembered how she was woken up that day as well. The blanket which she was wearing was pulled from her body by a pale-faced woman. And then they were made to march in a line to the dining room. The girls entered from one side and the boys entered from the other side. And from that group of boys, she remembered three boys who were at the back of the line who had come to their party earlier. See, like I said, this story is from a much larger volume of an autobiography of the author. This is just an excerpt. It's just a short part, all right? And so they all came to the dining hall, and soon she heard a bell being struck. And as soon as she heard the bell being struck, she thought everyone pulled up the chair, all right? One bell was sounded and everyone pulled their chair. And our author, Zitkala saw, thinking that, okay, so they want everyone to sit. So she sat down. And only when she sat down, she realized that all of the students were still standing, all right? They just pulled the chair at the sound of the first bell. And she felt very embarrassed and she got up again. But as soon as she got up, a second bell was sounded and everyone sat down. So now, again, she sat down, feeling very uncomfortable. And then someone from corner of the room started murmuring something, all right, and everyone hung their heads. So most probably they were praying, but she couldn't understand them because she did not know the language which was being spoken. She was newly admitted to this school to learn the American way of living. And everyone was praying, and she was surprised at the events that was unfolding in front of her eyes. At the third bell, everyone stopped praying and then started eating. She, on her part, started crying because she was afraid to venture anything further. She was afraid that whatever I do, it will be wrong because it seems they are trained in a certain way. But this eating by formula was not the hardest trial in that first day. Late in the morning, my friend Judwin gave me a terrible warning. Judwin knew a few words of English, and she had overheard the pale-faced woman talk about cutting our long, heavy hair. Our mothers had taught us that only unskilled warriors who were captured had their hair shingled by the enemy. Among our people, short hair was worn by mourners and shingled hair by cowards. So, even then, even though she was crying, all right, even though she was crying and even though she felt sad, she tells the readers that that wasn't even the worst part of the day and it was just her first day at school. Later in the afternoon, her friend Judwin, who knew a few words of English, all right, she came up to her and she told her, Zitkala Shah, our author, that she heard the pale-faced woman talking and she understood that she was to cut their hair, all right. And Zitkala Shah was taken aback, for in her culture, her mother had taught her that only cowards carry shingled hair, all right. Those who went into battle and lost the battles, the enemy would cut off the hair of the losing party as a sign to show that they were losers, they were cowards. And that is why she opposed the idea of her hair being cut. Because according to her culture, short hair was the identity of mourners, someone who was mourning the dead. And shingled hair, cut hair, was a sign of being a coward. And she was not both. So she was against the idea. We discussed our fate some moments, and when Judwin said, we have to submit because they are strong, I rebelled. No, I will not submit. I will struggle first, I answered. So Judwin, accepting her faith in that situation, she says, we can't fight it, all right? Doesn't matter what we think of our shingled hair. It's a part of the institution and we have to follow it, for they are strong. We cannot fight against them. But Zitkala Shah said, I will not give in. I will rebel. I will struggle first. I will not go without a fight. I watched my chance, and when no one noticed, I disappeared. I crept up the stairs as quietly as I could in my squeaking shoes. My moccasins had been exchanged for shoes. Along the hall I passed without knowing whither I was going, turning aside to an open door. I found a large room with 3 white beds in it. The windows were covered with dark green curtains, which made the room very dim. Thankful that no one was there, I directed my steps towards the corner farthest from the door. On my hands and knees, I crawled under the bed and huddled myself in the dark corner. So, as an act of rebellion and to escape her hair being cut, she came up with a plan. When no one was looking or when no one was noticing anything that was going on, she quietly snuck off out of the common room, all right? Trying as hard as to not make any noise with her shoes, for her soft moccasins had been replaced by the shoes which were being worn by all the other girls. She climbed upstairs and she managed to find a room which was empty, all right? Empty as in empty of people. There were beds, there were curtains, everything, but there was nobody inside. And the curtains were very dark. and that made the room look very dim, and she thought that this was the perfect hiding place for her to hide, to escape her hair being cut. So she crept under the bed and she hid there, trying or thinking that she would escape from her hair being cut. From my hiding place, I peered out, shuddering with fear whenever I heard footsteps nearby. Though in the hall loud voices were calling my name, and I knew that even Judwin was searching for me, I did not open my mouth to answer. Then the steps were quickened and the voices became excited. The sounds came nearer and nearer. Women and girls entered the room. I held my breath and watched them open closet doors and peep behind large trunks. Someone threw up the curtains and the room was filled with sudden light. What caused them to stoop and look under the bed, I do not know. I remember being dragged out, though I resisted by kicking and scratching wildly. In spite of myself, I was carried downstairs and tied fast in a chair. I cried aloud, shaking my head, all the while until I felt the cold blades of the scissor against my neck and heard them gnaw off one of my thick braids. Then I lost my spirit. Since the day I was taken from my mother, I had suffered extreme indignities. People had stared at me. I had been tossed about in the air like a wooden puppet. And now my long hair was shingled like a coward's. In my anguish, I mourned for my mother, but no one came to comfort me. Not a soul reasoned quietly with me, as my own mother used to do. For now, I was one of the many little animals driven by a herder. So, Zitkala Sa, thinking that she was safe, kept hiding under the bed. And later on, she could even hear people calling out her name. Even her friend Judwin was calling out for her. But she did not make a sound because she wanted to escape her hair being cut. All right, she did not want that. She did not want to feel like a coward because, like I told you, in her culture, people with cut hair, people whose hair were cut, are normally cowards who had lost in battle. Finally, people started entering the room where she was hiding and she kept very quiet to avoid being caught. Then one of the girls opened up the curtains and light filled the entire room. And she doesn't know why, but somehow they looked under the bed and dragged her out. And even though she was fighting a lot, kicking, scratching wildly, she was taken down, put in a chair. And still she struggled until the moment one of the blades of the scissor came near to her neck and cut off one of the two thick braids that she had. As soon as one of the braids was cut, she gave up the fight. And she remembered all the other indignities that she had suffered, all right? How people used to stare at her, how she was tossed in the air by people, and how she is being treated in this school, trying to make an American out of her, even though she is clearly not an American, but a Red Indian. But now she felt like a sheep, all right, among a group of other sheep, a herd of sheep. All the other students, all the other girls and the boys that were there in the school, they were a part of a flock. And they were being molded into something which they were not supposed to be in the first place. They were being molded to be better representation of the American culture, and because of that, she started feeling like a sheep, all right? And so with this, we complete the first part of the chapter, Memories of Childhood, the first part, cutting off my long hair. And tomorrow I'll be doing the second part with you. So first part is complete, cutting my long hair, the sufferings of Zitkala Sa at the hands of the school authorities, where she had been placed to learn the ways of the pale-faced men and women, all right? And so following this video, I'll be sending you questions as well for the chapter tomorrow, all right? For now, for today, all I want you to do is go through this video and go through the text as well. Read along as I am reading. Find the difficult words, underline the difficult words, all right? If there's any part of the story which you did not understand, feel free to call me or text me, all right? And then following day, that is tomorrow, I'll be sending you a summary and the questions for this chapter as well. All right, till then, stay safe and take care.